Life is a garden, and we are all gardeners. Today, we are going to talk about how sometimes you are raised in a family where you wonder, how did I get here? That happens in the garden sometimes. You will turn around and there will be something that is growing, and you wonder, like, I know I didn't put that there. That doesn't even look like the rest of the garden. How did it get here? So as in families, sometimes you're born into a family where you wonder, like, am I even related to these people? Which I have had that moment, even though I adore my family. And then sometimes you say everybody else talks so much and you don't even talk at all, or not everybody else talks as much as maybe you do. So I want to talk today about that kind of situation. I'm going to call this one Silence, the Sound of Silence in the Garden. So when I'm working in my garden, I'm always talking. I'm singing, I'm talking to my plants. Some people find that working in the garden is a place where they want to be meditative and they don't want to talk and they just want to sit and listen. My guest today is my friend and my landlord, and he was raised in a place of complete silence. I'm going to let him tell his story, but I'm going to start with the fact that when I moved in here, I didn't know any of that. And one day he asked me about living, because I live under and he lives on top. And he asked me, if it was too noisy for me or if I could hear him up there. And I told him that I really don't hear because I wear 2 hearing aids. And he said, that is so crazy because I got to tell you about my family. So I'm going to let him tell the story about his family, but it's the whole message here is the universe works in mysterious ways. So I'm going to let Roberto, first he's going to tell his story about what it was like to grow up in his family and what it's like to be different in his garden.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Okay, so I grew up in Switzerland and I was born there from 2 parents that are both deaf, like 100% deaf. And I have an older sister. I think that she had it harder than I did because she really, truly was born and lived in a deaf family. I had a little bit easier because I still had her to talk to or to learn how to talk properly. But I also had my parents, and so I would just sign to them. Weirdly enough, and this happens to pretty much every child that is born with 2 deaf parents, when you speak to a hearing person, you just speak with a regular voice. But if you start signing with anyone that is deaf, you actually start to sound monotone and guttural as much as they do. So I don't know if it's because you just want to be like them and you want to relate to them when you talk, or it's just natural because you're concentrating so much on signing and your facial expression in your hands that you lose control of the voice. You don't pay attention to it, and so it just starts to come out really strange.
Wait, I want to ask you something. So when you learned to sign, did they teach you how to sign or somebody else taught you how to sign?
Well, I mean, I could ask you the same question. Did someone teach you English when you were a baby, or did you just learn? So
Well,
it's
I
the
learned
same
from
thing.
my parents, so yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, by watching the parents or them talking to you, although, yeah, they were talking to me because they both had voices, but they were really rough, especially my dad. I could see them talking to each other or to their friends, and so you just learn that way.
Got you. Right, of course.
So, yeah. Although I did have it easier than my sister, you find yourself in really strange situation when you go out in the world and not everybody's like that.
Okay, that's so funky and lovely, actually. So your sister, her voice was different than your voice.
Well, she could hear, so her voice was, let's call it normal, as in like any other hearing person.
But who taught her how to speak if nobody was speaking?
Well, that's the thing. So when I said that I had it easier, is that she had a harder time to communicate with other hearing people. And so when she started to go to school, teachers could tell that she had communicative problems. And so they brought in, the social worker or whomever was at school saying, why do you have difficulties relating to other kids and stuff? And so at a young age, they suggested to my parents that she would go to boarding school 5 days a week so she could relate to other kids that could talk, and then she could come home and sign. And so that way was a little bit easier for her to learn how to talk properly, yeah.
But you did not go to boarding school.
I did not. So let's put down this premise. My dad is from a different generation. He was 56 when I was born, so he could have been my granddad. And at that time, when you come from a poor family and you have a handicapped child, you send them away to learn a trade. So by the age of 8 to 10, he was already deaf, of course. They sent him to boarding school to learn a trade. They sent my mom to the nuns so she could learn, to be a factory worker or just be productive. My sister was sent to boarding school. And so I remember that before I started school, my father said to me, and it wasn't malicious at all, it was just a fact, He said, I was sent to boarding school, your mom was sent to the nuns, and your sister to boarding school as well. If you don't do well in school, I'm going to send you far away. And that terrified me. And so from then on, I knew that I had to take care of myself.
Wow.
And you grow up really fast. Yeah.
I would think you had to take care of them too out in the world.
Yeah. So first off, and I'm not proud of this, but any kid with different parents, especially if they're handicapped, there is a sort of embarrassment. You don't want to show them to the world. And so going to school, I knew that I had to do my best in order for them not to come and talk to the teacher or to be seen by my friends, my school friends. And so you take care of yourself in the sense that if you don't know how to do your homework, tough shit. You have to do them. They can't help you. They're not educated. They don't know what they would be reading. I lost my train of thought. Okay, so you take care of yourself that way. Emotionally, of course, you take care of yourself because they really don't teach you things. They're not wise enough, or at least then, for that generation, they weren't. And so you find things out for yourself. But also, you find yourself being taken care of them because when they're out in the world, and especially when I was just out with my dad and he was very guttural, he didn't know how to speak well, you're 5, you're 6, and you're asking directions to adults or ordering food at the restaurant because they can't. And so you're there for them. And so in a sense, you grow up really fast. You become the parent and they become the children. And that stays with you. So I think it stays with you for any kid that has handicapped parents, no matter the handicapped, or addictive parents, And so you sort of like lose your childhood and you have to be in control because that's what you do. That's what you're there for.
Right.
And you sort of resent it for a very short time, but that's how life is and you're born in it. And so you just go on. And
not to mention you don't even know any better.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So actually you were kind of the groundskeeper of the whole family.
Right.
And what made your sister was she gone all the time?
Well, when she was in school, she would be gone 5 days a week and then come back for the weekend.
And did that happen all the way through high school?
Pretty much up until when we moved back to Italy from Switzerland. My parents were immigrants in Switzerland like I am an immigrant now here in the States. But yeah, I would say up until when I was 8 and my sister was a young teenager, she was in boarding school. And I know she had a great time too. So she wasn't too resentful, but she was sent away. And me being a mama's boy, I didn't want to be away from my mom. So,
tell me what was in Switzerland. Why Switzerland?
Well, that is connected to how my parents met.
Which we need to hear that.
So my mom grew up in a poor area of Milan, in a poor family. And like with anyone that has something big in their lives that, like being deaf or being gay or whatever else, you seek the same people. And so my mom was friends with the only deaf person in the area, which was this older lady. She was about 20 years older than she was. Then this young married couple came into the same area. They moved there, and she became friends with them. They were the same age. They were peers, and so they became really close.
And they were deaf as well.
They were deaf as well, so there is that commonality. And once the three of them became good friends, this older woman became sort of like crazy obsessed with my mom, and started to harass her wherever she went, dinner or movies and stuff. And so my mom pleaded with this woman's husband to keep her at bay because she was really scared of this woman. And this woman's husband, my future father, became such good friends with my mom and this couple, and that's how my mom and my dad fell in love. And at that time, divorce not being legal in Italy, they decided to elope and just go to Switzerland, where they could still speak the language, Italian, in the southern part of Switzerland, and still keep in touch with their deaf friends and stuff. So that's how they met.
I love this story because I feel like everything has a silver lining, regardless of what it was.
Mm-hmm.
You might have had this crazy lady in her life, but she met your dad.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's lovely. So you went back to Italy because, how come? Why'd they decide to leave Switzerland?
I guess was the kids' pressure. Every time we went back to Italy, we associated the Italy with a good time. Obviously, the only time we would go to Italy was during the holidays.
Vacation.
And so, of course, we would meet our cousins and, just play, and school wasn't there. And so, obviously, we loved it. Once we moved back to Italy, reality hit. It's the same old things. You go to school and it's everyday life. But I think that my mom was missing her mom and her family, and so it was time to go back. And so they did. So I partly grew up in Switzerland, which rubbed off on me in a big way. Neat and fussy and all that.
I find that shocking.
Right. But also Italy, of course. So I grew up in two places.
That's really cool,
Yeah.
actually. So when you went back to Italy, did you stay in a community of deaf people still?
Yeah, so my parents always found a deaf community, whether they were in Switzerland, whether they were in Italy, because they wanted to find their kind and also have the support, as far as where do you go for this, where do you go for that, all that. So they did have the deaf community and friends in Switzerland as well as in Milan, old friends and new friends. And of course, I realized that I was different from my parents almost right away because I knew I had to sign to them, and they would ask me what did they say or what did she say because they couldn't hear. But it was my world, and that's all I knew. But also growing up, they had deaf friends with hearing kids. And so at first you think that the whole world or the family set up that way. And it was only until I went to school and I found out that other kids didn't have deaf parents that I realized that, yes, we were different. And that's why I, sort of became embarrassed or ashamed.
So tell me how that changed for you. When did you realize this is who I am, this is who they are, and how old do you start accepting that kind of situation?
I think it's different for everyone. I had the double whammy that my dad also looked like my grandfather on top of being deaf. But,
No.
As a kid, you want to belong to a group. You want to be like everybody else. And then, you start to develop your own personality, individuality when you, maybe 15, 16, that's what happened with me, where I realized that there was nothing to be ashamed. Yes, I'm different, and people started to be thrilled or ask me questions and be surprised how different my life was. Sometimes I still find myself watching TV without any audio, so...
Just reading the lips.
Yeah, or, just it's a quiet time, for me it's quiet time. And so I think at around 16 you sort of start realizing, oh, I'm more of an individual than everybody else, you don't really appreciate until you get out of the stupid age, which is what, 20, 25, and then you go, I think it was a blessing somehow,
Right.
And that's when it started for me, when I stopped being ashamed maybe around 15, 16, but then I started to be proud of it at about 25. And I go, this is my mom. She's deaf. I speak sign language. You
Right.
don't, kind of thing. So
That's
yeah.
so good. That's so
Yeah.
cool, and I love that. Okay, so you knew you were different from everybody else. What else made you different from everybody else?
Oh, yeah.
That
Penis
little detail.
flytrap, right? Yeah, the gay thing. Like we say in Italy, if someone doesn't see what's in front of them, you have 2 slices of salami over your eyes. And I think my parents did, because for them not to realize that I was gay was just like beyond my comprehension. But yeah, so my dad passed away being much older when I was young, and of course I didn't have time to come out to him, nor I wanted to, because he was from such an old generation. But then I did come out to my mom, I think at 25, when I moved here, just when I moved to the States. And she was incredible. I mean, deaf people are not subtle, and especially older generation, maybe because they have a lesser education, they don't really think in abstract thoughts. Everything is material. Everything is basic. And let's just say that within 5 minutes, my mom started to ask me really graphic questions.
Really?
Yeah. So by her asking questions, and I knew that she was healing and everything was fine. And maybe having grown up, being so different, then she understood,
Right. I was thinking that, like,
Yeah.
it had to be a little easier for, maybe it wasn't, but it could have been, because she knew how different she was
Right.
from everybody
Right.
else.
Yeah.
Okay. And so did somebody have to explain to you how different life was for you as a little person? Was there anybody in your world that was like, maybe I have deaf parents too, or I have different kind of parents, or did you just kind of wing it and figure this out on your own?
It's all winging it. I mean, there are moments where, you are with other kids of deaf people, and you sort of like compare notes, like 2 exes, compare notes about a boyfriend. And you go, oh, yeah, they do this. Oh, yeah, they do that. Or you have to do this. You always have to answer the phone. You always have to go to town hall with them to, explain to the clerk what they need. But, I mean, first off, you don't know any difference. So it's not that you
Right.
complain. You just do it. So, no, you have to wing everything from language barrier to anything, even, the sex talk that you usually have with parents. No, of course I didn't think of that.
Right.
I sometimes I think how reckless my parents, or any parent that has a disability, is to have kids. But then, it sort of like balances out, because the kid becomes the parent.
Right. Right.
So
I mean, I kind of had reckless parents as well. They definitely weren't deaf, but they had their messiness,
Yeah.
know. And no one explained to us what that was either.
Right,
So
right,
we just
yeah.
learned how to wing it. I didn't even realize it was that until I was old enough and had my own messy kid to realize, like, whoa, that's not how everybody else's.
yeah, and you
does
compare
it,
notes.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the obstacles can be really big for all of us, I mean, and I'm going to reference a garden again, too. Sometimes your garden, the dirt is really hard to manage, or the sun isn't exactly how you want it. And then you just learn to grow what you can grow where you can grow it. So that's how you kind of did that. So was leaving to come to America a runaway, or was it a plan always? Did you feel guilty? Because I know you kind of ran your household. What was that like?
Well, actually, like with any family that has a son and a daughter, usually the daughter ends up being more the caretaker rather than not. Although I did take care of certain things that my sister couldn't, like financially, for instance. But yes, it was a runaway, more about the gay thing rather than anything else. Out of shame, you just leave your extended family, so that you can live your own life. And that's how it started. Maybe like my parents being reckless with, having a family and no money. I was more reckless as far as let's travel the world and see what's out there. I want to see, everything. So I think out of recklessness and wonder more than anything else, because I wanted a different life than my parents had, because they had it hard. So I just wanted to look for something better. But going back to what you asked, yes, there is guilt. I mean, I think that goes for almost any child that lives far away from the family. You have a guilt towards your siblings that are left with a burden to take care more about the parents, but also the guilt that you're so far away. I mean, my mom went through a lot of health problems, and sometimes I felt powerless that I wasn't able to drive there within an hour in order to, get to her. So there is that guilt, but you make up for it. I mean, my sister was always so busy surviving life that she never really had quality time. I was the opposite. I was able to make a good life for myself. And so when my mom would come to visit, it was quality time. She had fun. I took her places. We traveled, and she saw the world, and she met my friends, and she could tell that I was proud of her.
That's lovely. I love that.
Yeah.
So juicy and kind.
So, you make up for the guilt.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Like we all do, you know. But I want to say, as a mirror to you, like, I wouldn't think there's one reckless thing about you. So the idea that you left there, I mean, obviously we all know we have to have our own lives, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Guilt is so funky, though, too. Thank God it's something you hopefully will grow out of, that we all do.
I mean, we had good training being grown up Catholic. You deal with guilt, and then it slides off you after a while.
Right.
But no.
I had good
understandably so.
training growing up Jewish. That's just
There you
what
go.
it is.
Yeah.
So I heard you say that you realized that you took that bad situation and turned it into an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Like realizing I'm proud of my mom, that she is who she is, and I'm proud of myself, that I am who I am. So were you able to tell your mom all of that? Wait, first I want to ask, because you were here and she was there, and she only knew how to sign, and you were here long before there was a phone that you could see her. How were you communicating with her?
So, before the States, I traveled in Australia and in England. And at that time, all I could do was actually call my sister and say, I'm well, tell mom. That's basically it. Or write them letters. Then I would write letters. Then we started using fax machines. We would write a letter and just fax each other, which was the simplest way to communicate, and it was great. And then obviously when, texting and video calls, then it made it a lot easier. And she said to me many times that she didn't feel like I was so far away because she could actually see me. And so we were able to talk, and it was nice. So the last part, as far as missing each other, it wasn't so bad just because we could talk and sit down and just...
And did you sign with your mom all the way up till the end, or did
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, she was great with lip reading. I think that my ability to speak languages came from her, because she was able to speak well, have a good voice, and learn fast. And that's what I got from her, which was great. What was your question again?
Speaking to your mom from long distance.
Oh, yeah. So, I did sign, and towards the end, when I really wasn't practicing my signing that much, I would do both. I would enunciate words and use my hands whenever I can. But obviously, being from Italy, you always use your hands.
Yeah, I always use my hands, and I'm not from Italy. The other thing I want to ask is about sign language. Is that a language that you speak in Italian, or is that a language that you could speak to somebody in English?
No, it is different. They have different signs for different words. Now, I think that the older, less educated generation would have one sign for one meaning, one word, whether it's fever, whether it's red, whether it's, man or woman. Right now, deaf people are likely more educated, and so they tend to spell words. So the alphabet is the same, yes, but then you would either spell a word in English or in Italian, so it is different. So it's not universal, unfortunately. So I really wanted to take my mom to plays or to, deaf comics, and it would have been fun, here in the States, but she wouldn't have been able to understand. So, yeah, it is different.
That's so interesting and cool. Okay, so I want to ask you. Obviously, you don't. Not obviously, but you don't have your own children.
Right.
So, if you were to take all the seeds that you got from growing up and start your own garden, which you have, what do you think are your strongest seeds that you got from that mother and father plant?
Hard work, humility, and that you're not, I'm going to choke up, you're not less than everybody else.
That's so good. It's lovely. And what if you could change something? Obviously, still having deaf parents, would you have told them to do different that would have been easier for you?
Honestly, no.
Isn't that a good feeling?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we went through a lot of hard times, whether it was them, whether it was me, whether it was between us and stuff, but I'm proud to where I got to, and it was because of them and because the way they were. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so amazing. I feel like people that have handicapped parents, although me too, I mean, mine were a bit handicapped in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not even overcompensating. You learn a different, like a harder way to live, but a stronger way of being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, I think that double life, it's always been my constant, like my deaf parents' world, hearing world, them being immigrants in Switzerland and then going back to Italy, me being gay, the world being straight, me living here as an immigrant but having a double life because I'm also still Italian. And I lost where I was going with this.
But I have a good garden reference to this too. You know, there are certain plants that they say don't put them in there. They're very difficult to grow, but you are determined to have this certain plant. And then the plant gets so strong and everybody's like, I can't even believe you're growing that. That never,
right,
ever would grow anywhere else. And I feel like you are that plant.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid. It's truly a hybrid. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, like against all odds.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing. I mean, I learned so many things from you just living here, and your ethics, the way you do things, your work ethic, your living ethic, what you are. I mean, to be honest, when I first moved in, you definitely put the parameters down. You slammed those rules. My kids and I were like, whoa, because I grew up where there was no rules.
Yeah.
You, right from the get-go, were like, these are my rules.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is going to be a doozy. But I knew in my heart of hearts, we're going to be sisters.
That was Switzerland speaking, you know.
Was that Switzerland
yeah,
speaking?
definitely.
Love
was
that
Switzerland.
Mamma Mia Italian in you.
But you know, that's actually one of the things when you talk about hybrid plants, and you know, maybe they're not so pretty, but they're resilient.
Strong.
And sometimes my attitude is like that, in the sense that you know, growing up not only Italian but with deaf parents, it's almost like you know, two blades. You know, I have to learn how to deal with Americans. You know, it's a much gentler way of approaching life and approaching people. And here I am marking everything with a red marker because I'm Italian. You know, I say things and I say what I feel, and then on top of that, you've got the, you know, the double-edged sword that I also came from deaf parents, so there's no gray in there. You know, you just come out and say it. And sometimes I know it comes out too aggressive, like, you know, some hybrid plants that you don't really like too much, but, you know, it's there.
Or I look around your garden, all these pokey cactuses.
No shit. You know, I never really thought about it that
I
way.
did.
Yeah.
If you say your garden says a lot about you, we're going to show you this garden because it's fabulous, but it ain't messing. Very pokey.
Yeah.
And when I first did move in and knew him, I was definitely like, I don't know, he might be a little bit 2-2 for me. But then it took us 15 minutes and we spoke
Yeah.
the same language. And I learned a lot of that, even in just this time of being here. Like, say what you mean what you say. Don't say it mean, but get it out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to thank your mom and dad for that one.
Okay. They
The
like it.
Swiss, the Italian, the mix, the American. So if you were to speak to a child that has deaf parents now, and you wanted them, in short, to say something like, I'm going to tell you something because I'm on the other side now, what would the message be?
Oof, it'll be a long conversation. What you hate now, you will love later. And so
good.
don't despair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
Yeah. Although it just seems a little,
Trite.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. But
Yeah.
it is true. It is true. I mean, what I hated before, I love now. I even love the fact that I am this way. Maybe I'm too direct. Maybe I'm too rough but it's because of them. Yeah.
And I love that about you too. I'm never wondering what he's thinking.
Right.
Yeah, never. It is out and loud and
Yeah.
proud.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is such a good conversation. I love sitting in this garden. I love this man. And I do say, we kind of are our gardens. You look
Yeah.
at mine. Mine's a little messy, a little
But
flowery.
we're that close.
A little
Yeah.
fluffy, yeah. And yours is definitely key. I mean, we're sitting under this fabulous pepper that this guy buttons up on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it never looks out of step. And I feel like that's kind of the life that you lead. So quickly tell everybody what you do for a living so they know you.
All right. So I'm a storyboard artist. And once again, I translate words into images. Shit, I never really thought about
I
it that
did.
way. But yeah. So that's what I do. That's what I got from my dad. Although he was, a hard worker and he was an upholsterer, he was very artistic. He used his hands, and I'm grateful because I built this house with them. And my artistic side came from him. So the language side I got from my mom. The artistic side I got from my dad, and I'm thankful for that. I'm lucky that I actually love what I do.
Yeah, and it's so good to have both sides too.
Yeah.
That's really an important and really good. That takes you so far. Okay, this was a beautiful
Thank you.
afternoon
This
under the
was
pepper tree with
even
me
better
and
than I
Roberto.
expected. Yeah.
Good. Smooth.
Yeah.
Okay.